are listening to the Ropes and Riffs podcast with your host, John Kiernan.
It is the one and only Dijak here with us today. One of the premier people on the scene right now and one of the tallest people I've ever met. How you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. And once again, thank you for being on the show today. As we are Ropes and Riffs, we're talking to wrestlers, musicians, and with people such as yourself who have such a long lineage of entrance themes. We're going to be talking all about that today. So,
Sounds good.
before we get into the stuff about the entrance themes that you're using now and what you've used before, you've obviously been a world-traveled wrestler. You've been in Ring of Honor. You've been in WWE. You've been all over the place over the last X amount of time. For you, when you're thinking about, this is the music that I want to represent me, what's the thought process for you, whether you were choosing a song that already exists or going into having a song written for you?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of two main pieces to it for me. The first, and I'm not a music person, but I'll use as much of music terminology as I'm familiar with, or at least what makes sense
Sure.
to me. So the first portion of it is like there's the initial sort of sound, just the first sound that anybody hears. I think that that's important, just to be distinct. I don't think it necessarily needs to be like a catchphrase or like a really sudden sound, although I've used both of those in the past. I think it's as long as it's distinct. I don't like it to be sort of a generic sound at the beginning. I like it to be something unique. And then the first drop, which I think is important to come at like a depending on TV production and things like that, maybe 10 to 20 seconds after that, just something where it can be like, here's the definitive entrance moment. So to me, those are sort of two of the most important pieces of that. And really, I have no other metric other than when I hear this for the first time, does it give me goosebumps? That's kind of my only barometer in terms of listening to something as to whether or not I think it's memorable or good or great or whatever. That's kind of the approach that I use. And then another piece of it is does it have the proper cadence, right? Like I think if something is too upbeat, then that doesn't work for me specifically, because I'm not, running to the ring or flying to the ring or even walking quickly. Usually it's more of a medium lumber sort of motion and movement as I progress to the ring. So I think it needs to be something within that kind of time frame in terms of cadence. That's mostly what. Other than that, it's just whatever genre speaks to me at that particular point in time. Usually based on the character, or based on how I'm feeling, or whatever it happens to be.
And I love the music that Mikey put together for you. I love the music that you used right in your NXT run. And I also love the fact that early on in your career, you also used music from Devil Driver, which is such a heavy band. I believe the song that you used by Devil Driver was Sail.
Yes.
And it's really cool to see. First off, Devil Driver is just awesome.
Mhm.
But for me, I've always been such a fan of them. And to see that, like you said, even though it's not that it has to be something genre specific, it seems that you've kept kind of more of that harder style and that metal kind of element through most of the themes over the last X amount of time.
Yeah, usually that seems to fit sort of the character presentation and the what I'm going for. There's been times where it began to trend in a different direction. Certainly with the Dominic Dijakovic stuff, just because we wanted that to feel more. What's the term? What I mean, the character was
More grand,
Croatian.
yeah.
Yeah, the character was Croatian based, so we wanted an influx of that, certainly in the music, but still with sort of a metal edge to it. that's always kind of fit into the my character is always going to be, if nothing else, uh, large, imposing, and violent, just because that's the way that I'm trained and the way that I perform in the ring. Even if I'm doing like a quasi comedy character, me there's no room for a lack of violence in a fighting scenario, right? There's no situation where I would ever be not violent. So that to me that always is going to be part of it, no matter what character I'm doing. I think that the metal piece of it usually sort of reflects that as best as anything else.
And you hear that too between, like you said, the Dijakovic music and then the Dijak musics that you've used more recently. Now, when you had gone from doing more of the Donovan Dijakovic esque persona and went more down the road that you're doing now, was there a conscious decision to say, even during that time, hey, I wanted to go ahead and be more of this rough and tough, like more Terminator esque visually character? Or was it more like back then, they were like, all right, this is what you're going to do? And then upon you coming back into being more Dijak, you're like, all right, this is the direction I've always wanted to go, and the music reflects that.
Closer to the second that you said, yeah, the character was mostly presented to me as kind of a. Uh, I don't think they wanted to give me something completely brand new, but
Sure.
it was their creative vision of what they felt that you know would be the best fit for me and what the story that we're trying to get across is. So yeah, that was sort of presented to me, and then the Dijak, obviously T-Bar was 100% given to me, and then although I mean I will say that the amount of it that we were allowed to contribute ourselves, we did, right? Like from like nobody said like you have to wear these pants or something, or
Sure. Yeah.
you have to do your face paint exactly like this. That wasn't said. Like it was said that you have to wear this mask and you have to, your name has to be T-Bar. So we did. There was constraints, but within that came some sort of creative freedom of how can we make this as good as possible, and we certainly tried in that aspect. But the Dijak character on NXT that began at the end of 2022 was certainly the first time where it was like, this is 100% my uh, concept and vision. And then the music was made in part to sort of connect to that.
And I'm so happy that you have really embraced that Dijak character too. I've loved your work ever since even before you got to WWE, and just seeing the trajectory of your career and still that you're crushing it and killing it. It's so cool to see it as an evolution, but it's so cool to see, okay, this is where we're at now with it. And this presentation I think is so solid. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that creative control that you have, because when you came back as Dijak and you've taken this character from NXT and now everywhere else that you go, you've worked obviously with Mikey Rukus, and
Mhm.
you've gotten the opportunity to work with him and Def Rebel on the two themes that I think you've most recently used.
Yeah.
In terms of, we'll talk about the NXT theme first, just because we'll kind of bring it into that. So that's Driver, the one
Yes.
that you used most recently before the current theme that you have. What kind of creative input do you have when you're working with WWE on your entrance theme? Because I think there's some wrestlers that say they have a load of creative input. There are other times where they say, hey, I have this gimmick and they have this theme for me. I'll give them maybe a couple references or two. But at the end of the day, this is what they have for me. What was the level of creative input you had with Driver?
None. It was given to me. Uh, Thankfully, I thought they did a good job. But yeah, I actually, it's kind of funny. WWE is an interesting place. Things vary from moment to moment, from person to person. There's some guys who they write and compose their own theme song and they work heavily. The most interaction I ever had um, when I first got to WWE in 2017, um, the very first theme I was using as Chris Dijak before they gave me Dominic Dijakovic was just stock music. It's something that I picked, and I actually kind of liked it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I liked it. I picked it, but it wasn't like the greatest music because it was just stock music. But
Sure.
I thought it was pretty good, and people seemed to dig it. But then we did the Dominic Dijakovic switch, and uh, no, I'm sorry, I'm stepping ahead. Before I even got signed, I had a phone call with I don't remember the guy's name, but he was some representative of CFO dollar sign, um, and he had like a long conversation about what my vision was about music and and we probably spoke for 90 minutes
Oh wow.
just about music and what different kinds of things I liked and what kind of sounds resonated with me, pace, things like that. And this was before I was even with WWE, so I was like, wow, this is great. There must be huge plans for me, and we're gonna have this custom song, and everybody cares, and this is gonna be wonderful. That never amounted. I don't know whether they made something and it just didn't exist, or whether or I have no idea what the the goal of that was, and who knows what happened along the way. But yeah, nothing ever came of that conversation because I ended up using the stock music for about a year, and then finally we did the Dominic Dijakovic switch. Um, at the time of Dominic Dijakovic, CFO was still making music for NXT,
Right.
so they made a theme for Dominic Dijakovic, which only got used one time on TV. Didn't even know this was happening. It was just sent to me one day, and then literally like that week, they switched to Def Rebel. So I think that I was the last CFO song ever made
Wow.
because it was like literally in the middle of production. Then they're like, actually, we're switching to Def Rebel. So then I immediately got a brand new song that again I wasn't uh, consulted on whatsoever.
Sure.
And again, the timing of this obviously is like people leaving and people coming in, so they're probably just trying to do as much stuff as possible. And
Yeah.
I'm debuting on TV like within days or whatever, so I'm not holding that against anyone. It's all timing and things like that. But it was just kind of sent to me, and it was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Oh, can we try this, and try this?" And then they're like,
This was a
like,
formality asking you, what do you think?
yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think it was more like, actually, you're on TV tomorrow, so this is it. So that's kind of, I was like, oh, all right, whatever, that's fine. Um, so I kind of had that theme all the way up until Retribution, when again, it was just, um, it wasn't even sent to me that time. It was sent to Ali because he was our leader, and he was like,
Sure.
"Hey, here's our song." And we actually thought that one was pretty good too because it had lots of different choruses. It had like uh, it had a bit of a Rage Against the Machine sort of feel
Yeah.
to it. So we were happy with the music, and yeah, very similar sort of process with the just to go back to your original question with the Dijak character on NXT. Um, it was basically days before my debut, and it was like, "Hey, has anyone talked to anyone about music?" And they were like, "Not really." So I was like, "Okay." So I just picked some stock music that I kind of liked, and I'm like, "Yeah, this will work. This will be fine." Because I guess at the time there was like this revamp with NXT 2.0, and they weren't sure where funds were getting allocated and things like that. So
Sure.
they were just generally like, "Oh, people don't really get custom songs here anymore." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine, whatever. I don't care. Like it's a piece of the puzzle, but whatever."
Right. Give me something that I like at the
Yeah,
very
so
least.
so
Yeah.
I just picked some stock music. I sent it to them, and then the next day they were like, "Oh, just kidding. Def Rebel has a song for you." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then they sent that to me, and I listened to it, and I'll be honest. So the first time I heard it, my initial thought was because it was difficult to picture the full package, right? once I saw the plan for the entrance and the lighting and the shot from behind and all that stuff and the screen on the top and the different strobes and things like that, I loved it because the whole it's a piece of the presentation. The first time I heard it, I was just sitting in my car and I heard it, and my first thought was, this sounds generic. My
Sure.
first, because it was just you know, I felt like it could have been any stock music or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this. And to me, when I hear generic music, I think, oh, that they're gonna. I'm gonna be a generic presentation, and that this is gonna be, because you got to remember, I'm coming off of this Retribution thing, and this is this is basically my last shot in WWE, and I know it's my
Right.
last shot. You know, I'm on NXT, and it's like, come up with a new character, come up with this, and if it doesn't work, my contract's up in a year and a half or whatever. So I heard the music, and I'm like, oh, because I'm picturing just music hits, lights stay on, and I just walk out and walk to the ring, and everyone goes, "Here's
Right.
another guy," right? Uh, so I was like, so I had major concerns, and I brought this up, and they were like, "Don't worry, just wait until you see the full presentation." I was like, "Okay." So we did the full presentation. I was like, "Oh, this music's great." You know, if it because the lights hit, and then the thing comes up, and the lights are coming from underneath, and the whole presentation, it starts in close, and then it moves, and it all just fit with the flow of the music. And I was like, "Okay, now that I can see the whole vision, now I really enjoy the song," and it became, I owned it, and I added different parts to the beats, and I figured out where to get in the ring and where to pull down my glasses and all that stuff. So I was super super happy with it after that. But yeah, in terms of me contributing to it, almost nothing.
But I love too, even though, like you said, it was more them kind of handing it to you. I love how you turn around and you say, I thought it was generic up front, but when I saw it with the whole brand, the whole vision, it changed the perspective on that. Because I think when it comes to entrance music, a lot of the times we think of the song itself should be strong, 100%. But I think you and Lindsay Dorado, who I recently talked to about the themes also, had a similar perspective. It's not just the music. It's
Oh
not
no,
just the visuals. It's not that. It's the whole product. It's the whole brand
very
of
much.
Dijak or Lindsay Dorado or whoever that's coming in, and everything has to work. So you may hear it, and I think maybe from things in the past, it's like, all right, cool. Here's a generic song. Walk out, hope for the best, get in the
Right,
ring, and then get out and let's see. But for
exactly.
you, it sounds like when they had that song in mind, they were just like, okay, cool. The entire presentation has to line up with this. And,
Yeah.
you were able to parlay a lot of those elements into, out your ex WWE or your non WWE work too, with Capital Punishment, which was written by Mikey Rukus, which is also a banger of a track. So you go from Driver, and now you're into Capital Punishment. You're doing your own thing. You're everywhere now. Talk about the process working with Mikey too, because as a friend of Mikey's and working with him on a couple things, I just think Mikey, as a person, is the best, and as a composer, he's got the eyes in the right place too.
Super talented guy. I've been following him since before he was with AEW. I've always been a fan of him. Unfortunately for me, by the time I became aware of him and his work, I was already with WWE.
Right.
So I couldn't utilize it in any capacity. But then I saw, I saw the formation of AEW, and I saw that they picked him up, and I said, oh, that's a great grab for them.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to say within days, if not hours, of me finding out that my contract wasn't going to be renewed with WWE, he was within the first probably 10 people who I told. And that includes my wife and my children and my close friends. He might have found out before my parents, honestly, because it was literally one of the first messages I sent was, "Hey man, I've been a huge fan of you. Please keep this on the down low." But I'm not. I don't even think I was 100% sure at the time, but I wanted to get ahead of it, right?
Right.
Because I was told like, "Hey, we're not going to be renewing your contract," but the reality of negotiations is that that could have changed, right? I was still under
Right.
contract, and they could have said, "Oh, yeah, actually, we're going to offer this," and then there's a negotiating process. I didn't know if it was
Right.
a negotiating tactic or whatever at
And
the
even
time.
something happens with somebody else, and then all of a sudden they say, "Hey, we now have a plan for you,
Correct.
bring you back
Yes.
in, all that." Yeah.
Yeah. So, but regardless, as soon as I got any sort of inkling that that I might not be with WWE anymore, I immediately hit him up. I said, "Hey, I'm a huge fan of your work. I would love to collaborate with you and create something. Um, I'd love to be as hands on as I possibly can be." And he was super accommodating. Within probably 48 hours, I think he got to work, and I had a fully. We went back and forth quite a bit, in terms of, he sent me, I think, 3 or 4 different samples, and he said he thinks this one is the best, and it's the one that we ended up going with. And I said, absolutely sounds the best. What, can we tweak this? Can we add this to the entrance? Can we do something here in the middle part at the 45-second part? He changed all of it. There was one part in particular, which is, again, when I described the different parts of the song. This is the second part of it, the drop part where I come out.
Right.
Um, I felt like the original portion that he sent me was probably about 4 seconds long before it moves on to the next part. And I wanted more than 4 seconds, so I was trying to get him to double that up, so it would be 8 seconds of me standing there. Just because I felt like that drop in that presentation, that moment needed to live longer. And we were
Yeah.
having such trouble. I was having trouble communicating to him what part I was talking about. Like, I was pointing it out and trying to relay what my thought was, and it was so difficult, to the point where I just got on an audio thing and I like sang it to him.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, okay, now I get it." And he
That's awesome.
immediately did exactly what I wanted. And I've never been happier with a song before than with Capital Punishment. I think it's fantastic. And in my opinion, the best part about it so far is that nobody's even seen it with like a full presentation. I think the best that we've got so far is at MLW, which
Yeah.
has this wonderful screen. But there's still elements of production where you can have smoke and lights and different camera. There's a million things you can do with it to really add to the essence of that presentation. So I think there's so much more that we can do with that. And I think that the theme itself hits even in a Knights of Columbus or a a high school gym. You hear it and it gives me goosebumps every time. So that's why I think it's a tremendous piece of work.
It's so funny that you bring up too the production side of it too, because you've been in places and you work in places that have different levels of production value, right? So
Yeah.
in your head, you see the full vision. You
Yes.
see what it can be. But
Yes.
then to be able to have a theme and an entrance that translates anywhere is really understated. But in your head, you're just like, believe me, if this was like the full production, we're gonna go all in on it, and it's gonna be even more impactful. And I love the fact that you brought up too that there were these little moments of like, okay, cool, I want to change this, I want to change this, but I literally had to sing this to him. As someone who writes entrance themes professionally also,
Mhm.
never feel weird about sending that little voice clip, because like the overall vision, the overall scope,
Yeah.
99 times out of 100 will nail it down. But there will
Right.
always, and I've had this too, where I've worked with wrestlers where they've been like, hey, I need the drop to just be a little bit more, like just time this out a tiny bit more. And
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, cool, we'll do 3 seconds. And it's just this little thing. And I'm like, look, hit me with a voice memo. Hit me with a
Yeah.
voice memo, and
Right.
we'll get it there, because then I'll just match it to it. And it's like the overall vision of it is something where it's nailed down immediately. But it's
Yes.
those little minutiae where it's just like, just tell me. That's totally cool. Never feel weird about dropping extra hints there. The more information that's given, the better. And for you, what were some of the references that you gave for that theme too? Because it's so unique, it's so heavy, but tacking down the influences for me, it doesn't sound like you were just like, listen to what I've used before. Like you really wanted to take it and make it the best and the most
Yeah,
unique.
I can't remember exactly what I sent him, but it was probably, I must have sent him like 7 or 8 references. One of the references was my former theme song Driver, just because I liked it and I liked the feel of it. but I wanted that in combination. I think my main focus was I think it was Rage Against the Machine. I think the song's called Wake Up.
Okay.
I think I used um I think I used a song by Korn in there.
Always a top shelf choice.
Yeah. But I sent like six or seven, and I actually like tiered them in terms of importance. I'm like, this is a good song, especially for the drop, and then these are the top three songs, and then I like this essence as well, and I like the drums in this song, and just stuff like that. And I think that he nailed all. Like you can hear the drums, especially like I don't even know like what part of the song this would be, but
Yeah.
it's every time I get in the ring, you can hear this heavy sort of I think it's a kick drum
Yep. Yeah.
sort of beat that hits as I get in the ring, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. You know, I can see myself going to the ropes and going to the top rope, and I can visualize the whole thing, and this is exactly how it plays out, and this is how I would like the lights, strobing as that's happening, and it was a really fun process.
And the other thing that you brought up is it can't just be something that's just for the presentation. It's
Mm.
music that has to pump you up before you even get to the ring, too.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes there's this kind of a little bit of a disconnect between does it fit the character, but also what does it do for you going to the ring? Because if it's not something that before you even get out through the curtain that you feel strong about, or it doesn't do something for you, or it doesn't elicit that feeling that you need to do your best work, it's a song, regardless of how good the presentation is. And ultimately, you're the one listening to it, you're the one having a vibe with it, and ultimately, you're the one has to sell the whole package. How important do you think it is to have a theme that doesn't just translate to the people in the front, but also resonate to you before you even get through the curtain?
Extremely important. I think might be the most important part of it, actually. By people, I mean like trainees and stuff, because I'm a trainer at the New England Pro Wrestling Academy. So kids come to me all the time, and they ask about. There's all sorts of elements, but music is obviously an important one. But they'll ask me about music. They'll ask me about gear. Different gear that they're wearing, moves that they do, move sets. Hey, how do you choose? How do you decide like what works for me? What are people going to like? I want to, and I always tell them, I'm like, you can't worry about what other people are going to like, because if you don't love it, then it's not going to translate, right? People aren't nobody nobody goes to a pro wrestling show and sits down and grabs their popcorn or whatever, and then the bell rings and they turn to look at the entrance. No one has a preconceived expectation of what they like or what they enjoy. They're not like, oh boy, I hope this song plays, right?
Right.
They're just waiting to see what plays and who comes out. And the reality of the situation is, if a song plays and the person who comes through the curtain is fully invested in that entrance, and they look like they've done it 1,000 times, and they're just full of adrenaline and confidence, and they're covered in gear that makes them feel special, then they're going to translate and project as special. That's the way it is. It's no one's ever looked at gear and been like, oh, that's it's not amazing gear. It's amazing gear on them. That's
Right.
that's what it is. It's an accentuation of the human being. The music is an accentuation of the human being, right? Yes, you can see it on paper and say, oh, that would look nice, and yes, you can hear it and say, oh, that sounds nice. And there's discernible differences between what's likely trending towards good and what's likely trending towards not good. Almost always it's the level of professionalism and effort put into something, as opposed to it's specifically one thing or the other. But in terms of the presentation of the person, if they're fully invested in everything and they feel great and confident in their gear and with their tan and their physique and their haircut and everything's on point, and the music is on point and everything is on point, then that's going to project as a confident, awesome visual. It's just a fun thing to watch. People enjoy that. People gravitate towards confidence. That's half of what quote unquote charisma is. People love to talk about this mysterious charisma. Oh, that this person has it, or whatever, which is really just a made up thing. But the reality of it is that people are gravitating towards confidence. They're gravitating
Right.
towards that person looks like they've done this a million times and that they're loving every second of it. That's a huge part of it. And I think music plays a vital role in that.
And you hear that all the time too. You hear it from bands over the years too, where they go, you know what? If I had like 5 more minutes before I went through the curtain for my first show, maybe we wouldn't be the Foo Fighters. You know, maybe we would have chose a different name that's more badass or something like that. Like Dave Grohl has gone on record and said that. But years down the line, 30 years in, and even just off like the first record, Foo Fighters is such a dope name. And you guys are just like, you know, we would have probably changed it. But it's like you said, it's a lot of the times it's the confidence and the whole presentation that brings that out. And I think anytime you see somebody who's successful in music or as a wrestler, you're just like, man, of course they're successful. They got the name Dijak. How could you not be successful with that? Listen to that music. Look at the gear. And for you, you're just like, I'm just doing me. I'm just making you see the most confident, epic version of what I want you to see. And if I believe it, then you're going to believe it. And if you believe it, then you're going to think no matter what, it's all the greatest thing you've ever seen. Absolutely. Yeah.
100%, yes.
Awesome. Dijak, thank you so much for making the time to chat with us today. What is next for you? What is next on the plate for Dijak? Where should be people feasting their eyes, I will say?
I'm going to the West Coast tomorrow. I have a show in Chino, California. You can check it out on my social media page. I'll be advertising it there. I'm not 100% sure what town it's in, but I'm in California somewhere. If you're in the area, it's close to LA. If you're in the LA area, so check that out. You'll get all the details, and you can get tickets on via my social media. And then on Saturday, I'm back at MLW in the Chicago area. Very much looking forward to that. I have a match with Kevin Knight, and it's going to be a really big opportunity for me there on the biggest stage that I'm currently on, which is MLW, and I'm super excited to show out there and show everyone what I can do and what I can bring to the table. So it's going to be a great weekend for me.
That's awesome. And big shout out to MLW. I've worked with a couple of the talents from there,
Mm-hmm.
the boys over there and the girls over there at MLW. Always crushing it. You're always crushing it. Thank you so much for making the time today to chat all about the awesome music and the awesome career that you're having. And I wish you nothing but the best, my friend.
For sure. Sounds good. Thank you very much.